Morning. It's great to see everybody. Welcome to Community Church of Boston. As usual, we light a candle at the beginning. Candle for peace, for hope, for unity. As usual, I'm wearing too many hats and I didn't have the candle holder quite ready, so I'm getting it ready so it'll hopefully stay there once I put it in place.
That says liberties.
I'm a guy who wears too many hats. Where's my acolyte who's supposed to deal with the candlelight? It's not going to stand, but we'll. Oh, Coletta. Yes, yes. Let's do this right. Let's do this right. Folks, say hello to Coletta. It's a treat that you came this morning. Was the green line running up your way? She took her bike. Yeah, wow. It's whatever. This morning, I want to remember a good friend of mine while we light this candle and invite other folks to do the same. Just let us know and we can remember some departed friend. His name was Richard Chalfin, and he just passed really quickly. We called him the mayor of the farmers market of Roslindale, which I sort of call my other church. I spend Saturdays there all through the summer and into November. Um, and Richard was a beautiful guy and really made that farmers market go, and was a customer to all the vendors there, including myself, and beautiful guy, wonderful gardener, and also a realtor. When a tree fell on our house, in a matter of 2 weeks, he had found a house for us to rent. And we were homeless for a month. He helped us move in and move out of that house. And he's no longer with us. So I say, as they say in Central America, Richard Chalfin presente, and send my sympathies to his wife, Joyce Chalfin, who's a wonderful ceramicist and potter who also sells at the market. So we remember Richard. And while Coletta does the candle, I will wear my other hat, which is to be your music this morning. But I'll talk about this hat as well, that just came in the mail. It makes me look like a military guy, doesn't it? Well, it's about the USS Liberty, which was bombed by the Israeli IDF in 1967 during that horrific war, and they knew perfectly well that it was a U.S. flagged reconnaissance vessel, and killed what about maybe 40 U.S. servicemen and injured a whole lot more. And some of them are still with us and remember the anniversary every year. And I just got this in the mail from a group that's called If Americans Knew. Allison Weir is the leader of If Americans Knew. She's spoken here several times. So I just wanted to acknowledge that hat and the other hat, which is musician. Here we go. You gotta have hope when every card seems lost. Gotta have hope when you're double crossed. Gotta have when every flower is dead. Gotta have hope, even if it's just a thread. You gotta have hope when every star burns out. Gotta have hope, one raindrop breaks the drought. Gotta have hope, you still have one breath. Gotta have hope, there is a way out, yeah. You gotta have hope when you're- you gotta have hope when the rest lose faith. Gotta have hope when you meet Satan's gate. Gotta have hope when you're terrified and scared. Gotta have hope when it's too much to bear. Gotta have, you gotta have hope through the unending night. Gotta have hope you'll see the faintest light. Whole lot of hope creates amazing things. Most sacred sunrise that you've ever seen. Ah, you gotta have hope. Whole lot of hope creates amazing things. The most sacred sunrise that you've ever seen. Ooh. I think this is maybe members Sundays because one of our members is delivering the address, and because next week one of our members is delivering the address as well, and this just a really proud thing that we have just some really eloquent, magnificent folks in this congregation. I want to mention to you that I've recently talked to four of the very most senior members, and I thought we should do some kind of celebration of them, reception in their honor. I'll talk about them. Dick Kashishin was our clerk for 20 plus years. Is doing okay, independent, lives in his own house, and I go see him every once in a while, and he has lots of gifts for me, like empty paper bags that I can use for delivering coffee, and greetings to you all from Dick. And then there's Nancy Messam, who lives in Cambridge, and I was in contact with her yesterday about a really interesting thing, which is you all remember Shanti Renfrew, who was Nancy's erstwhile partner for a few decades and passed away. And I'll tell you a really interesting little thing about Shanti, who's a veteran, and and another friend of his, Jack Bottomley, reached me about the ceremonial funeral that they gave for Shanti when his ashes were buried in the military cemetery, Otis Air Force Base, I guess, and they drove Nancy and Jack and a couple other people down there for the 21 gun salute and the taps and everything, and they sent her a form which says what would you like written on his headstone, and and she said, well, she reached out to me. She said, he loved Phil Oakes. Um, all the time he talked about Phil Oakes songs, and immediately out of my mouth came, I ain't marching anymore. What a perfect headstone, huh? For in a military cemetery, and so we're putting in. Oh no, no. There's more to the story. They put that. that suggestion in to the committee, whoever that is in charge of that, or the bureaucracy, and they got a reply. They say, we won't allow ain't. So you gotta clean up Phil Oakes's foul language. He uses is it like an African American tinged expression that's not allowed in whatever. So maybe it's I am not marching anymore. And as soon as I know that that's up on that gravestone, I think I'll take a group of people down there and have a picture in front of it, and it'll go in first on our bulletin board, but then in our new section of our archives, which is called In Memoriam, where we're just keeping obituaries and photographs of departed members of the church. So that's the story about Nancy Messam. And then there's Tilly Teixeira, and we send our thoughts and well wishes to Tilly, who lives just 3 blocks away from here, and had a fall and is in rehab, but is hoping to be home in a week or two. So Tilly, we love you. Got married in community church in 1954 or something, where at the time when you couldn't get married to somebody who was not in your same religion, and here was the place that cross religious marriages were tolerated and celebrated, as well as cross racial marriages. It's an amazing thing. And let's see, there's one more. There's Dick Crowley, who I went to visit. He lives in a old folks home in, is that the right proper way, in a place in Ayer that's right next to the Neshoba Valley Hospital that closed because of the steward mess. But he really likes the place, and he's doing okay, and wants to continue his work, which has been sort of membership committee, calling every single phone number there is in our membership directory, and catching up on people and taking notes. And thank you, Dick, for doing that for us. It's an important job that we sometimes don't have the bandwidth to do. I want to read a prayer that came to me thanks to Jose Maso, who is the salsa DJ on WBUR for about 40 years. And I was at a meeting where he read this prayer. Thank you, Jose Maso. This is by Gil Scott Heron, the African-American revolutionary songwriter. This is a prayer for everybody in the world, because I need you and you need me. We need each other. This is a prayer for everybody. Everybody in the world, a prayer for you, a prayer for me, a prayer for love and harmony, a prayer for light for all to see, a prayer that someday we'll all be free. Because there's a lot that's wrong. We must be strong and not become bitter. If there's a chance that mankind will profit, why should we scoff at something new or old if it can make us better? This is a prayer for everybody in the world, because without you and without me, without love and harmony, without courage and dignity, what would it mean to be free? Gil Scott Heron. So we talked about these members. I want to tell you about next Sunday, the Sunday before Thanksgiving / National Day of Mourning, when Calvin Airy will be joining us and talking about the power of books to free the mind of people behind bars. And case in point is the man himself. And we just look forward to Calvin's address next Sunday. The Sunday after that is December 1st, and we have David Rovics, the people's troubadour, who we love to hear from every chance we get, either on a concert night or on a Sunday morning. And on the subject of books, it being a Sunday about Mussolini, I just wanted to go up to the 3rd floor and grab a whole mess of books and just go through them, just as a little cross section of what it is that we have up there, that it's just a treasure, and will someday partially be a library, and I'm sure there's stuff that we need to cull out because we don't have unlimited space. But I just want to show you some. Mussolini by Dennis Mack Smith, a biography. The Italian Anti-Fascist Press, 1919 to 1945, by Frank Rosengarten. Now this is a cool one. Arsenal, Surrealist Subversion, and Surrealism in the Service of Revolution, Poetry, the Marvelous Dream, Revolt, Freedom, Desire, Wilderness, and Love. It doesn't have an author, but it made me think of InfoWars being purchased by The Onion. I can hardly wait. The Italian Fascist Party in Power, A Study in Totalitarian Rule, Dante El Germino. Mussolini, A Study in Power, Yvonne Kirkpatrick. Mussolini, A Biography by Jasper Ridley. Mussolini's Italy, Life Under the Fascist Dictatorship, 1915 to 45, R.J.B. Bosworth. Images of American Radicalism, forward by Howard Fast, who spoke at Community Church several times over several decades. Really interesting looking book I had not seen before. Every time I go up there, there's something new and different. Just two more. Mussolini and Fascism, The View from America by John P. Diggins. This is a big, fat, heavy book. I almost stumbled on the way down the stairs carrying it. The Memory of May Day, an iconographic history of the origins and implanting of a workers' holiday. I had not seen this one before. The author is named Marsilio Editori, or is that the publisher? It sounds like an editorial, like a publisher. No, I think that's his name, Marsilio Editori. Anyway, that's just a little cross-section of what we have up there. And Tim, you have a book that you just brought back, is that right? Picked it up. The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party by John Nichols. It's a book about Henry Wallace. I tried to get John Nichols to give a talk about that book, and I didn't get through to him. I'll mention also that John Nichols is on a webinar Monday night, late, like 8:30, 9 p.m., something like that. And it's a webinar from Our Revolution, which is the Bernie Sanders kind of originated political organization. There's three or four others that it sounds like a really interesting thing. John Nichols from Madison, Wisconsin. We still hope to nab him someday to speak here. Enough. I'll sing a song and bring up our speaker. Too many hats. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. There is no hell to fear, no judgment day drawing near. Trust that inner voice you hear every day. Life's not a goal or a race, it's about heart and faith and living a life of grace every day. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. Trust is an open hand, making an honest stand, rooted here in the land every day, living the mystery, seeking the harmony here between you and me every day. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. Every day. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. It's a simple faith. A very short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day, every day, every day, every day. Thank you very much. As this pile of books shows you, this is a place where you could come to find a whole lot more about alternative views of what could be in society. A whole lot about attempts at making that happen. A whole lot about every different stripe of those attempts, be they Marxism, socialism, anarchism, capitalism. They're all up there, well represented in the form of many, many books. Some of them are still in boxes that we haven't really gone through to figure out, should we donate this to a prison book program? Is there some prisoner out there who wants this book? Or should we give it to books, Words More Than Words, the amazing organization about teen empowerment and business incubator kind of things that's right near here? Or should we send it to the landfill, or should we keep it for our own library? This is the place, and this is the place that attracts the likes of Steve Kellerman, who is a retired machinist and longtime union activist. IWW Wobbly's long history with that organization has given us here at the church several really brilliant presentations. One was about the commie camp that he attended as a young man. It was called the Lincoln Farm Work Camp. One was about that that other presidential candidate that actually went to prison. Remind me of his name, Steve. Eugene V. Debs. Yes, thank you. I have CRS, and I won't tell you what that is. It's an affliction that you get. And Nancy knows what it is, and you can ask me privately what that means anytime you like. So it's really just great to have Steve back, and I think I lit a flame for his next talk, which might be about the origins of the Spanish Civil War and the origins that aren't really very well spoken of in the Spanish Revolution, he calls it, instead of the Civil War. And so that's a fascinating topic, which we have a ton of books about right here. They're down here in the auditorium right now. So let's welcome Steve Kellerman. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. Hello, friends. Okay, just parenthetically, based on something Dean said, in 1948, my father and likely my mother voted for Henry Wallace for president of the U.S. But, okay, the subject of my talk today is Benito Mussolini as revolutionary socialist and fascist dictator. Mussolini is very famous for having been a fascist. In fact, for having invented fascism as a type of politics. But it's not that well known that he was an active revolutionary socialist prior to the First World War. Okay, and also I want to say before I start that the name Benito is not Italian. It's a Spanish name, and he was named for Benito Juarez, the Mexican elected constitutional president of Mexico, who was overthrown during the American Civil War, which is why Monroeismo was in suspension at the time, and a French army came in and put a Habsburg on the throne of Mexico, Emperor Maximilian, and he overthrew the elected government of which Benito Juarez was the president. Juarez organized the fight back, and the Mexican people overthrew Maximilian, and he and his empress were put up against the wall and executed by firing squad. And Benito Juarez became, once again, the president of Mexico. His leading general was Porfirio Diaz, who later became a tyrannical military dictator of Mexico. And his reign eventuated in the Mexican Revolution that went on from 1911 through 1918 or so, and never really came to a distinct end. Okay, so this talk is on Benito Mussolini. When this program was first under consideration 6 months ago or so, it was conceived of as being strictly historical, a journey into a movement that flourished between 1922 or even 1919 and 1945. However, recent events here in the United States, as well as in Italy, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, Holland, South Korea, Japan, and elsewhere, make it clear that fascism has not only persisted, but is on the rise. Clearly, we will not see a lot of the outer manifestations of classical fascism, like black shirts and brown shirts, stiff-arm salutes, and crowds bellowing "Duce, Duce." But its essential nature is unchanged. The enrichment of the master class through the transfer of wealth from the working class majority, undermining of labor rights and unions, loss of elementary freedoms, victimizing of designated enemy populations, such as refugees and immigrants, hyper-nationalism, pageantry, aggressive foreign policies, racism, detention camps, and all the rest. So, to the topic of this talk, Benito Mussolini and his two major careers, his time as a revolutionary socialist and his time as the dictator of fascist Italy. But first, a few observations concerning Mussolini's character. He was always an opportunist. He expressed and advocated extreme positions, but didn't really believe in anything. His overriding purpose was to aggrandize himself, to put himself forward, to be the duce, the Italian word for leader, which is like the German word Führer. Mussolini came from the Romagna region of northern Italy. His family were very poor. His father, a blacksmith and later a tavern keeper, was an active and locally prominent socialist. In First International times, he was a supporter and possibly an acquaintance of Bakunin, who lived in Italy for a number of years. Mussolini's mother was a devout Catholic who worked as a school teacher. Benito Mussolini, from a young age, adopted his father's politics. And his father named him Benito after Benito Juarez. The version of socialism Mussolini advocated was based on class struggle. The workers, the proletariat, would organize to seize society in the workplaces from the bourgeoisie. For this, they would apply violence and direct action, two principles always at the heart of Mussolini's program and activity. He despised parliamentarianism, reform, and compromise. He was always anti-democratic. After finishing his schooling, he was qualified to work as a school teacher, which he did for a while in his native region. Before long, however, he was subject to military conscription. To avoid that, he moved to Switzerland, a country with a long tradition of harboring political refugees. He was fluent in French and approaching fluency in German. These two languages, in addition to his native Italian, were the official languages of Switzerland. He became a part of the community of Italians in the Swiss areas in which he resided. He did some semi-skilled work as a hod carrier and a mason's assistant, but mostly he worked as a socialist agitator and journalist. In fact, his whole life was marked by oratory and journalism. The socialism he preached was of the most extreme revolutionary type. He advocated the violent overthrow and expropriation of the capitalists, the master class. He was largely a full-time exponent of his brand of socialism, earning a meager income from organizing, speaking, writing, and translating. He never showed any interest in accumulating wealth, even though in his later fascist period he was surrounded by venal followers. Mussolini despised the mostly reformist native socialists of Switzerland, characterizing them as complacent sausage makers. He antagonized the pro-socialists, the pro-capitalist Swiss authorities to the extent that he was expelled from 2 cantons, what provinces are called in Switzerland, and eventually from the whole country. He settled for a while in Trent, an Italian-speaking region of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where he continued his agitations and socialist journalist activities. During his exile, he worked alongside the prominent socialist Filippo Turati, and more importantly, the multilingual Angelica Balabanov. She was in exile from Tsarist Russia, who was active in the International Socialist Movement, as well as the Italian Socialist Party. Balabanov was the secretary of the Second International in 1914, and after the Bolshevik coup of 1917, secretary of the Third International, the Comintern. During the Second World War, and for a while afterwards, she resided in the US. Balabanov worked closely with Mussolini in Switzerland and served as his mentor early on. In 1911, an amnesty was announced, and Mussolini was able to return to Italy and do his military service without any penalties. Upon completing his service, he moved to Forli to edit a socialist newspaper and to continue advocating a revolutionary and violent policy. As that approach became increasingly popular among Italian socialists, Mussolini became a major figure in the party and took the lead in the expulsion of such eminent reformists as Bissolati, Carabrini, and Cerati, who had served in governments. Mussolini now became the best-known socialist in the country and was made editor of Avanti, the major socialist daily newspaper published in Milan. It was actually a national newspaper distributed all over the country, and its circulation increased markedly under Mussolini's editorship. He continued his advocacy of violent overthrow of capitalism combined with atheism and anti-monarchicalism. Two programs that he advocated strongly during that period. He gave them up later. The First World War began in August of 1914, and Italy, although on paper allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, stayed out of the war. The Socialist Party remained opposed to the war, eventually becoming the only party of a belligerent country in the Second International, along with the Socialist Party of America and the Bolshevik faction of the Russian Social Democratic Party, to take such an honorable position. All the others, notably the German, French, and British parties, became supporters of the slaughter. In 1915, Mussolini, still editor of Avanti, received a large subvention, a bribe, from the French Secret Service and began noisily to advocate that Italy join the war on the side of the Allies. He was removed from the paper and expelled from the party. He used the subvention to found his own daily newspaper, the Popolo d'Italia, which he continued publishing until his death. Italy joined the war, and Mussolini was called up to the army. He was at the front in the Alps until he suffered a serious injury when a trench mortar accidentally blew up and he was mustered out. The war ended in 1918, and Italy, although on the winning side, was screwed out of getting in on the spoils by France and Britain. There was considerable unrest in the country with widespread strikes and factory occupations. Mussolini, still claiming to be a socialist, formed a violent militia of black-shirted brawlers called the Fasci di Combattimento. That's like the origin of the word fascism. The word fasci had existed in Italy for a long time, especially in Sicily. Different organizations called themselves fasci after the bundle of rods and an axe that symbolized the state. It came from Roman Republican times. And if anybody ever looks at a Mercury head dime, they'll see a fascist on the back. But okay, so the Fasci di Combattimento initially didn't have much of a program aside from violence and obstreperous nationalism. After a few years, things quieted down, and the workers, through effective unions, won better pay and conditions. The fascists failed to flourish. At that point, the industrial capitalists, unhappy at the higher pay eating into their profits, offered Mussolini money, large amounts of money, to attack the unions and the socialists. Quickly, the black shirts began a campaign of attacking labor and socialism. With the acquiescence of the army and the monarchy, the now well-armed and well-compensated black-shirted fascists traveled around the country in trucks, burning and looting union headquarters and socialist properties, beating and killing unionists and socialists, and dosing opponents with castor oil. Now, castor oil is a very strong laxative, yeah. And large quantities of this were forced down the throats of the victims of the black shirts. And that became a mark of Italian fascism from them then until the end of the movement. Mussolini, throughout all this, was the undisputed leader of the fascists, the Duce. The fascists grew, becoming around a quarter of the parliament, of which Mussolini was a bombastic member. In 1922, the fascists staged a comic opera coup, a march on Rome. The army and the king allowed it to go on, and the king offered the prime ministership to Mussolini. He took office without any sort of program other than being the head guy, and continued the attacks on workers and socialists, as well as non-supportive parties and the Catholic Church. Mussolini ruled by decree and somehow got a law through giving the party the largest representation, 66 2/3 of the seats in parliament. Yeah, I really have no idea how he got that law adopted, but he did. And so the Fascist Party became the largest party in parliament. While this was going on, the socialist deputy, Giacomo Matteotti, who was a reformist socialist, kept baiting Mussolini in parliament, calling out all his shortcomings and lies and the violence of the fascist movement, and using ridicule and humor much of the time. Mussolini was infuriated by this. In 1924, he arranged for a squad of black shirts to seize Matteotti off the street and brutally murder him. This murder elicited a huge reaction, and for a while, Mussolini appeared to be on the ropes. Many fascists deserted the movement, and the oppositionists in parliament rallied. I've always found this remarkable, considering the thousands of Italians who were assaulted and killed other than Matteotti. But the Matteotti murder really elicited a strong reaction. However, Mussolini's opponents failed to deliver the coup de grace, and Mussolini rallied. Within a short time, starting in 1925, he set up the totalitarian, a word he coined, the totalitarian dictatorship. He first outlawed freedom of the press, then progressively made all organizations of every type report all their activities and membership to the government. Effectively abolished parliament. All laws were now issued by decree, and the legislature became merely consultative. All education fell under government control. The king was stripped of virtually all power. The fascist Grand Council, a party organization, took over legislative authority. All political parties were dissolved, except, of course, the fascists. Law courts became subject to government control. Police were given authority to enter every premise. That's without any kind of warrant. Habeas corpus was abolished. Mail, telephone, and telegraph were subject to government control and search. Workers were required to remain at their jobs. Unions became a part of the government apparatus. The right to renounce citizenship was abolished. Government, that is fascist control, became absolute. Yeah, this is totalitarianism. Totalitarianism flourished in addition to Italy, in Germany and the Soviet Union at the same time. And although it was never as murderous in Italy, it was as total. Yeah, there'll be questions at the end. Okay, so on the positive side, this totalitarianism created order. The trains ran on time, famously. The Pontine marshes were drained, getting rid of a longtime source of malaria. Pageantry involving parades, rallies, songs, banners, patriotism. So all this flourished, and if you consider this positive, they were positive results. On the negative side, there was the alliance with Nazi Germany. Austria, a traditional enemy of Italy, was now part of Greater Germany. And Germany was now allied with fascist Italy. Enmity with Britain, which had been a traditional Mediterranean ally of Italy. In the late 1930s, under Nazi influence, racial laws were propounded and anti-Semitism became public policy. Now, these developments were widely unpopular and undermined support for fascism. Falling standards for workers and peasants were endemic. This had been going on the whole time Mussolini was in power. The living standards of working people and of the peasantry declined sharply, and the profits went into the hands of the industrial capitalists and other capitalists who had bankrolled the fascist movement. And wars. Mussolini had always advocated militarism and created the illusion that Italy was a powerful country. And so Italy, under fascism, engaged in a series of wars of aggression. Ethiopia, Spanish Civil War, Libya, which was a counterinsurgency campaign in one of the Italian colonies in North Africa, World War II, which were to varying degrees unpopular. Two novels from the 1930s indicate what life under totalitarianism was like. Bread and Wine by Ignazio Salone and Christ Stopped at Eboli by Carlo Levi. And both are highly recommended. They're available at libraries. People can check them out and are encouraged to. In addition to ongoing black shirt violence that really never let up, oppositionists were exiled to islands in the Mediterranean or put in prisons. Very briefly, it all came undone when fascist Italy entered into the unpopular alliance with Nazi Germany, and in 1940 entered into what looked like a victorious war. In 1941, Germany, and Italy at its side, attacked the Soviet Union. At the end of the year, the US entered the war. After North Africa fell to the Allies and Sicily was invaded in 1943, Mussolini fell, losing a vote of confidence before the fascist Grand Council. The king arrested and imprisoned him the next day. He was rescued by the Germans and propped up as the puppet head of state of fascist northern Italy, which was really under total German military occupation. He was executed by partisans near the end of the war and hung by his feet next to his longtime girlfriend, Claretta Petacci, and several other prominent fascists in Milan. You've probably all seen the famous pictures of them hanging by their feet. So, in his time, Mussolini was considered a major figure in international relations. His illusions concerning Italy's military might and warlike capacity were taken seriously until a major war actually came. So in conclusion, this is the story of Mussolini and fascism. It should be a lesson concerning what we are about to experience in this country and should encourage a forceful fight back. Okay, thank you. Excuse me? Okay.
Thank you, Steve Kellerman. Help us get ready for whatever it is coming our way. I found this song in the archives just the other day, and part of what we do is an introduction to the last song is kind of a in the churchy world they call it the offertory or the collection, and we talk about how we depend on your largesse to keep this thing going. And this song is about that. And I think the melody. I haven't tried the melody quite yet. I'm just going to read it. I think it's the melody to Do Re Mi by Woody Guthrie. It says, it's called the Community Church Money Song. All across the USA, people talking every day about that church in Boston that's fighting freedom's fight. They hear their preacher now and then, but radical women and famous men take the pulpit most of the time and bring the truth to light. And here I am in that institution to ask for a financial contribution. If we don't get the do-re-mi, folks, if we don't get the do-re-mi, you'll have to sit home next Sunday and watch Billy Graham on TV. Community church is one church worth saving, the only church for you and for me. But as sure as I'm alive, this church cannot survive if we don't get the do-re-mi. You say that you're down on your luck and hope that someone else's buck will fill the plate as it goes by and pay the church's bills. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid it's true that all we've got is me and you. It will take some bucks from each of us to cure financial ills. So one more time, I'm begging and cajoling, pay your share to keep this outfit rolling. Written by Paul Cole in 1977. First performance December 11th, 1977. There you have it. We find some gems. Don't you know it's darkest before the dawn? And this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now quite early morning. They say that humankind can't long endure, but what makes them so doggone sure? I know that you who hear my singing could make those freedom bells go ringing. I know that you who hear my singing could make those freedom bells go ringing. And so we keep on while we live until we have no more to give. And when these fingers can strum no longer, hand the old banjo to the young one stronger. And when these fingers couldn't strum no longer, hand the old banjo to the young one stronger. Though it's darkest before the dawn. This thought keeps me moving on through all this world of joy and sorrow. There still can be singing tomorrow through all this world of joy and sorrow. There still can be singing tomorrow. And though it's darkest before the dawn, this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now quite early morning. Well, thanks. Let's get Steve back up here to have a little conversation. Anybody in the audience want to, oh, all kinds of hands went up. Let's start with the Proctors.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but a similarity and then a difference with Mussolini in current times. Now, the similarity, you talked about the suppression of unions and workers' rights and whatnot. All the while Trump was running for president, we had Elon Musk, the world's richest man, paying for it, who has an agenda for working people in this country, and it's not good. Which he promises austerity so bad that it'll be painful. So that's a similarity. But now I want to talk about a difference, because while this election was going on, all the days leading up to it, I saw that people were going to democratically elect a fascist. So if the people democratically elect a fascist, we need a new name for that. I mean, what do you call that?
I call it fascism.
Yeah.
Whether it's elected or not,
It's
fascism. And a couple of things. Mussolini and Trump. I believe Mussolini was much smarter than Trump. He was well read. He read all the time. He was a pretty good writer of a journalistic sort. Trump is none of those things. But they're both egomaniacs. Their entire program is putting themselves forward. Yeah, Trump at various times has been in favor of abortion. Now he's against it. Yeah, he has no principles. Mussolini, likewise, had no principles. But as I said, Mussolini was much smarter than Trump. John?
Yes. First of all, Steve, I want to thank you for explaining to people what fascism is, because it's a great duty that you've done to people. A lot of young people on the left feel you just shout them down. That doesn't work. You need to understand what fascism, and you need to tell your fellow workers and fellow citizens it's not in their interest. And people, it's accepted out of ignorance. And the second part I wanted to say to you was, there's a great commonality of all fascists. There's that they move through the political spectrum, like Mussolini did, from left socialism to fascism. For example, Oswald Mosley in England, he went from the Conservative Party to the Liberal Party to the Labour Party, and then created the British Union of Fascism. Donald Trump was once a Democrat. in New York, and now he's a Republican. They go right through the spectrum. And I don't know if you want to comment on it or what, but it's kind of a commonality amongst them.
It is, although Hitler and Franco were always fascists from day one. But yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. While you were talking, I couldn't help but think of one of the victims of Mussolini in Italy. Was an Italian Jew named Primo Levi, and he wrote several books. Just this morning, I was reading some of his poems in his collected poetry, and he joined the resistance movement to Mussolini, and he wound up getting picked up and sent to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend his books. They give you that view from one of the victims of Mussolini.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. Primo Levi wrote a book called The Periodic Table. He worked as a chemist. That was his job before and after the war. And because he was a Jew, he ended up being arrested and went to Auschwitz, where he experienced the horrors of the extermination camps. He survived and came back to Italy and embarked on a career as a public intellectual, but ended up after a few years committing suicide. I think a lot of people were so damaged by the experience of the camps that they killed themselves. So absolutely horrible. But yeah, his books are well worth reading. Oh, his name is spelled Levi.
I think, thank you for a nice talk, incidentally. I think in the hopes of getting people to understand fascism, it might be useful to compare it to a much older and more time-honored system, that being royalty. And that being royalty, the divine right of kings. The main difference is that I think if Mussolini had hung around a while longer, it wouldn't have been his kids necessarily that became the heads of government. But so the line of succession is perhaps a little more open under fascism. But what would you say the other differences are, and what would you say the similarities are? And you can make the argument then that most people have given up on royalty. So if you could make them see the similarities, it might be a powerful argument.
Yeah, well, there are a few similarities. At the time Mussolini was growing up, outside of Switzerland, I think every country in Europe was a monarchy. It was, that was the prevailing form. Switzerland and the United States and countries in Latin America were the only republics around for a while. That came to an end after the First World War. Nowadays, there are very few monarchies left. Monarchies, one time during the Middle Ages were, absolute royal dictatorships. The king undertook pretty much all the legislation, all the taxes were decreed by the king. In some cases, like in England, they had to be cleared through Parliament. But until the Stuart monarchs in Britain kind of overreached and got into conflict with Parliament, the kings pretty much had their way. Like King John, the former Prince John, was famous for ruling by decree. And he raised a lot of money to ransom his brother, was Richard the Lionhearted, and kept the money for himself until he was forced to pay the ransom. And Richard came back but didn't live too much longer. And John became king in his own right. But as time went on, especially into the 19th century, monarchies became more constitutional. They shared power with elected parliaments, and but by the 20th century, the absolute monarchies were pretty much extinct. There are still a handful of monarchies in the world. Most of the Scandinavian countries are monarchies. Japan still has an emperor, although, in all those countries, the governments are parliamentary. Yeah.
But I was thinking in particular of the king also had a council or a court through which he delegated his authority. I think Donald Trump is actually working, probably not consciously, but I wouldn't guarantee it, towards a similar model. Actually, there's an interesting article I read by the head of the chief editor of the American Prospect recently that said the cabinet doesn't, his cabinet picks don't matter. He's bringing in advisors like Elon Musk and others into the White House, and it's all going to be done directly within the White House. And these people are really just PR agents, his cabinet. So anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to observe that this country has a very long democratic tradition. And even though Trump is clearly a fascist and is surrounding himself with fascists, I think there's room for a really forceful fight back. And I think we should be organizing now and continuing into the Trump presidency to oppose it strenuously. Also, he doesn't have the focus that Mussolini had. In his first term, his advisors were like a revolving door. Hardly any of them lasted through the 4 years, and he himself really he got almost none of his programs through. Congress got rid of most of them. He did a few things that I approve of, like opposing NATO, which that military alliance that exists to oppose Russia. That puts the whole world in danger of being obliterated by atom bombs. And both Trump and the Democrats have been in opposition to China. Again, the United States is declining as a world power. It no longer has the hegemony that it had from the Second World War until a couple of decades ago, and China has been rising. These people are putting us all in danger of a nuclear holocaust, which, if it's general, has the ability to wipe humanity out altogether, and many other species. So,
and if you'd like an economic analysis of what Steve just said, look at our YouTube from last week. Richard Wolff talking about the BRICS and basically the end of U.S. economic hegemony over the planet. It's a really fascinating talk, and it has garnered 400,000 views in just 1 week. Remarkable, Richard Wolff. Steve, we're going to make you a star next. We have others. We also have quite a sizable number of folks on Zoom and YouTube. And let's hear from Joel, and then go online.
I'm a little wary of the overuse of the word fascism. Nazi of Saloni, in fact, said the future fascists won't be so stupid as to use the word fascism. They'll call themselves anti-fascists. It was a famous quote from. So I think, Trump is, sure, he's an autocratic dictator and so on, but he's not an military expansionist the way the fascists were, in that sense. So Franco wasn't, but Germany and Italy were expansionists. That was part of their. So I think there are different. I'd rather use autocracy or just describe what's happening, rather than use a emotionally laden word.
Yeah, well, I described at the very outset. I talked about, like a lot of the outer trappings of fascism from the 1930s are not going to come back. Brown shirts and black shirts, the stiff arm salutes, the jackboots, but the attack on the living standards of working people, the attack on unions, the authoritarianism, the increasing power in the hands of the presidency, and these are all I consider them fascist, and I think this is widely understood as being fascist. And, dictatorial. Yeah, Mussolini and Hitler were two fascists who embarked on military conquest. Others like Salazar in Portugal and Franco, as John said, in Spain, weren't trying to conquer. They did carry on wars in their colonies against insurgencies, but they were not expansionist the way Germany was.
We have online Charlie, and after that, Faye. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate your talk. The one thing I wanted to probe a little bit more, I know there won't be organizations, with brown shirts and black shirts as you described them, but there were, the fascism did depend on proto-military organizations to smash the unions and hold other things. And, we have the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers these days, but I don't think they're approaching anywhere near the degree that the brown shirts did. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, as of right now, the Proud Boys, the 3%ers, they are not approaching the authority that the brown shirts and black shirts had. But we can't foretell what the future will bring. It's possible that with government encouragement and government arms, they could become much more powerful than they are currently.
Don't forget what he said how many years ago, Proud Boys, stand by and stand back.
Yeah.
And that's still in effect. I have a friend in Columbus, Ohio, who talked about a Nazi rally that happened there this weekend with flags, swastika flags. And, you can't underestimate how those groups are feeling their oats right now and just preparing for action. It's a horrible thought. Too many horrible thoughts in my mind about immigrant roundups that you think of the 20s, the Palmer raids, or you think of 2016 when here in Boston there were ICE agents on courthouse steps and near the turnstiles of subway stations, just checking papers and grabbing people. I hope it's just a lot of campaign trail bluster, but it's a really scary thought, and I really fear for my friends here in town who are not correctly documented. I fear for them.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, all through the vast movement that opposed the Vietnam War, I was always surprised that there wasn't more government reaction outside of the Kent State shooting down of 4 students, and I think injuring a few others. For the most part, the government allowed it to go on, or it did go on. I don't know.
But they've learned their lessons.
It's at hand now.
That could change immediately. I think of those Atlanta protesters against Cop City, and we're going to hear about that December 8th. There's a program about that here. who are now charged with RICO, just serious federal
Yeah.
charges. It's
Yeah,
just,
I've
Yes.
always had the idea of RICO.
Yeah.
I know they drafted it to put mafia gangsters behind bars, but in fact, the idea of being charged with a crime of which there was no evidence that you engaged in a crime, and they say that you're a conspirator. I've always had a lot of trouble with RICO laws.
yeah.
And I think, it's horrible that that Mayor Buddy Cianci of Rhode Island was put behind bars for years under a RICO prosecution.
Faye, welcome. Join us.
Faye is muted.
Unmute, Faye.
Yeah,
There you are. We hear you now.
yeah. Well, I was thinking about the men's march against abortion that happened. When was it? Yesterday. Things like that are kind of scary too, because you don't, it's part of all that organizing, right-wing, right-wing demonstrations. My question, I want to ask the question. I don't know very much about Italy, and I was wondering what you think about what's going on in Italy now. On the one hand, you have people like the who is it, Maloney? Isn't she a fascist? Doesn't she believe in fascism? And at the same time, you have Italy has implemented. This is what I've read anyway, and I hope it's true. They've implemented an arms embargo against Israel, and the only country that's done that so far. So I'm just wondering, can you comment on what's going on in Italy now? Because I have no sense of their history. I always think of it as a country with, many tribes kind of fighting each other, but that's out of ignorance. I don't know. So.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it. I don't keep up with the press that much, but I know the current prime minister of Italy is a woman named Meloni, who is a fascist, and the traditional fascists, the Italian social movement, the ones who go back to Mussolini and Chano, that they are currently a part of the government, and but Italy now is not a thoroughgoing fascist dictatorship. It's not totalitarian.
One thing now, Steve, is there's a term, they're called hipster fascist, young people, and it's a big movement throughout Italy. There's been a number of YouTube videos on them, and it's spread throughout the country. And years ago, probably right up until the beginning of the 21st century, a lot of the left would provide certain types of aid that the government didn't. Now these young fascists have done that. Food for the poor, some type of help needed for heating, et cetera, et cetera. And so the hipster fascism has really caught on, and sadly has caught on in Italy.
Yeah, well, in 1977, Nancy and I were in Italy at the time. Yeah, we were there for a few weeks as tourists. And at that time, they had a general election in which there was a possibility of the communists winning a majority, in which case they would have become the government. And the United States government and other countries were acting as if this would be a dictatorship of the proletariat. It wouldn't have been. The communists would have, they participated in governments elsewhere in Europe after the First World War and never looked to set up a Stalinist-style dictatorship of the proletariat. But while Nancy and I were in Italy, they had the general election, and each of the parties trucked and bussed like
We don't hear you. Yeah, I don't hear you.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, the Christian Democrats, and the fascists all had national rallies. And I wanted to go to the fascist rally. Nancy wouldn't let me go. But we heard later that for the first time since 1945, people showed up in black shirts, literally, and were giving stiff-arm salutes like in the old days. So I'm sorry I missed it. She thought that I would have been killed by the fascists who were there. In fact, I think I wouldn't have indicated that I was an opponent to fascism. I think the only danger would have come from an anarchist throwing a bomb into the crowd, but that never happened either.
We have,
excuse me, do you know anything about the arms embargo? Yeah, in Italy, because I think that, to me, that's that's very hopeful. And I'd like to know where that came from,
No, I don't know much about it, and I know that the United States keeps sending arms to Israel and other countries. There have been some efforts, I think, by the ILWU, the West Coast Longshoremen's Union, to moderate that, but it's still going on.
I heard about strikes or actions against Maersk, who is a huge shipping concern that does a lot of the shipping for the weapons that go to Israel, and there have been some blockages of Maersk shipments. I read about that, which was interesting, and about Spain. But we have Jeff Stein on the Zoom, and would you unmute Jeff? And we'd love to hear from you.
Hi. We seem to be getting some feedback, but at any rate, I was going to ask Steve about the role of the Catholic Church vis-a-vis Mussolini, and it just seems to me that one of the elements of fascism is the takeover of the churches. And this is something that hasn't been talked about much in this country because people are afraid that this is going to be seen as a criticism of religion or something like that. But at the same time, that wall of separation between the church and state seems to have come down. And now particularly the evangelical churches of the South have become very politically involved. And this has played a big role in Trump's rise to power.
You fellow worker. Yeah, what you say is true. The situation in the United States now is pretty different from the situation in Italy in the 1920s. At that time, there was essentially just one church. There were a handful of Protestant churches in the entire country, and they were persecuted. There were Jewish synagogues around the country, which were not persecuted at the time, but were later on. But the situation in the United States is very different from that. The evangelicals have been organized for years now into a right-wing movement. They supply the foot soldiers for the anti-abortion movement and provide votes and muscle for the Trump movement. Yeah, in Italy, the situation was that Mussolini had traditionally advocated atheism and was a strong opponent to the Catholic Church. Once he got into power, in establishing totalitarianism, he opposed the church and its the control that it had over education, and also that he opposed the church, the mafia, any other organization that was not part of the fascist totalitarian setup. So that this is pretty different from what we have in the United States. Yeah, in the U.S. we have a lot of different religious movements. Liberal Protestantism, which even though it's not as large as it was in former years, is still a big movement. I have contact with Unitarians and Congregationalists who are about as far from being fascist as you can be. Also there are a lot of Muslims, Jews, and non-religious people in this country. It's a pretty different situation from what you had in Italy in the 1920s. But Mussolini continued attacking the church. He got into discussions with the church, which had a history of conflict with the Italian state going back to the unification of Italy, which involved Italy taking over the papal states. And the Concordat that they entered into with Mussolini involved setting up Vatican City, which is very small, but it's a church state surrounded by Rome. Relations between the Catholic Church and the fascist state continued to be rough because even though they entered into a formal concordat, Mussolini and his government kept encroaching on the Catholics. They got rid of Catholic education and had every student in the country attend fascist-controlled schools. So, religion and totalitarianism really don't get along that well.
We have David Q online. Will you unmute, David, and talk to us? Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for this talk. Appreciate you referring to the violence that was used by the brown shirts before Mussolini came to power.
The black shirts.
It seems quite important that if a fascist regime were to come to power and to begin outlawing all of its opponents and destroying the trade unions without using violence ahead of time on a big scale, then it would be the first time. So I agree with you that the situation is not, in the US, is not such that the big capital is going to be funding squads of violent people. The biggest factor against fascism would be the unity of the working class and the working class parties against the fascists. And so immediately our best protection is the call for a demonstration in Washington, D.C. on the 20th of January, it seems to me, and I hope we can discuss it. It's by a limited spectrum, but also a broad spectrum. And maybe we can organize something in Boston to protest against the assumption of power by Trump without making a claim that he's going to destroy all of our organizations when he takes office.
Okay, I have a couple of comments on that. One is that when Trump was first elected in 2016, the night after the election, Nancy and I went down to the Boston Common, and it was totally covered with people. There were more than 10,000 people on the Common. Shortly after that was the Women's March, which again brought out over 10,000 people. I remember Commonwealth Avenue and the whole Back Bay were covered by it. And that was the end of the movement. Yeah. During the protest movement against the Vietnam War, it went on year after year. The people didn't just go home after one demonstration. The what's required now is an ongoing movement. We can't just go to Washington, D.C. on the 20th and say, okay, we've done our part, now we'll go home and resume watching TV. It has to be an ongoing struggle. Let me see.
Somebody else on there? Okay, we're getting near the end. If there's anybody else here in the room that, I will say that there is still an organization called Women's March that came out of that, and they're planning for another march. I don't even remember the date. I have it in my calendar, and be interested in either going to D.C. or attending the Boston march.
Yeah, but it has to be continuing. It can't just be a one-time deal.
Continuous. Yes.
That was the strength of the anti-Vietnam War movement, was that it didn't end. It went on and on as long as the war went on.
Yeah.
And even though it didn't bring the war to an end, it undermined support for the war in the United States and turned the army mutinous. By the end of the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, they were relying on nothing from the United States but a bombing campaign, because the soldiers were on the point of not only refusing, but they were fragging their officers. And back in the United States, the Vietnam Veterans Against the War was a very large and important movement. They're still around. Nancy and I subscribe to their publication, The Veteran, and I recommend it highly. If you get on their mailing list, you continue receiving it forever. It's a movement that deserves support. They have a very high quality of writing in their publication, and a very good point of view towards public policy.
Steve, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank all of you.
We're going to watch how this great movement unfolds in the upcoming years, and you better know that Community Church will be at the center of it in organizing and activism and providing space for all kinds of groups. We already do. We have Extinction Rebellion here. We have Muslims for Progressive Values that meets here. We also have the Democratic Socialists of America, Palestine Working Group that meets here, and hopefully even more and more to make for a powerful movement. Stay tuned. And stay active, and stay writing letters and finding out what's going on in the organizing world.
I want to say I belong to the Boston Labor Solidarity Committee. There are 3 other members present here today. The BLSC, one of our members, fellow worker George Kushevitz, has called for every oppositional group, every Trotskyite, every Stalinist, every social democratic, every women's movement, every feminist, every movement that stands to oppose the Trump fascism should get together. And BLSC right now is aiming to call for a meeting of organizers from all the whole array of oppositional and potentially oppositional movements, and to have a huge rally sometime in the spring. For all these organizations to bring out all their members. So we really hope that flourishes. And what this really needs is an ongoing struggle. And it may get tough. Trump and his movement may rally the Proud Boys and the rest of the street brawlers to attack us. And we have to be prepared for that. And we have to fight back and continue fighting back.
Steve. We're getting short on time, but Tim, go ahead.
What freaks me out the most is the insurrection. Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act if there's widespread opposition. And I think nothing will motivate that opposition more than when he tanks the economy, which he will do pretty quickly, I think, according to what we heard here last week.
Yeah, Trump has threatened to invoke, and in his first term, attempted unsuccessfully to invoke a law that was passed in, I think, possibly by the Congress of the before the U.S. Constitution came into effect. There's a very old law called the Insurrection Law, which allows the government to employ the U.S. Army to engage in police activity. And yeah, all this stuff has to be expected and has to be opposed. We have to put our bodies on the line.
There is no freedom, a wise man said, let justice roll down, roll down. When the poor cry out for shelter and bread, let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we will make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Thank you, Steve Kellerman, and thank you all for being here. Thanks, all of you who joined online. We'll see you soon again. Go to our website. There's a PayPal and a credit card option for you to help us make this thing keep happening deep into the future. This is when we need to be together to oppose fascism and to achieve democracy. Lofty words, but words to work towards. Let's declare the meeting over, and let's have a beautiful lunch that Luis Guzman has prepared for us. Thank you, everybody. It's in the back. Forgot to.
Recording stopped.
Forgot to pass it around, but it'll be.